We thought it would be fitting on this 95th birthday of this person who has always given of himself to everybody else, for everybody to come and give something to him. And so we've organized a little program of people to tell some stories and say some things about Clarence Kailin and all of his fine work.
Clarence, this is Daniel Kunene. Happy birthday, happy 95th, you look great. It's a privilege for me to say a few words again to wish you good health and long life, and keep being the Clarence that you've been, namely someone who is for human rights, someone who is always on the left side of the situation. I will remember forever how you and me and Selena, my late wife, worked on apartheid and American involvement in apartheid. Those were wonderful years, and it's great to see you here again. Happy birthday.
Hi, I'm Gene Farley here at James Park. We're celebrating with Clarence Kailin's family and the Veterans for Peace, the Clarence Kailin Post, that he is one of the founders of. We're celebrating Clarence's 95th birthday. And all I can say is Clarence has been an amazing person in this community, and Linda and I, ever since we came to Madison, appreciated all that Clarence does and has done and will continue to do to help improve our community and wake people up and make them think.
So Whitman's just 90 years younger than Clarence. She is 5. And once upon a time, Clarence was a 5-year-old in Madison. And I understand Clarence's association with Spain and Spain's love of Clarence. He has actually taught the Spaniards how to respect their own experience. Franco spent decades trying to beat that memory out of people's heads. Clarence Kailin came back to Spain and said, no, we fought for a nobler cause. And when he went to John Cookson's grave, and when he said, I will be buried here in the soil of Spain by my friend John Cookson, he said, I will be buried not in the soil of one country, of one nationality, but I will be buried in the soil of a cause, the cause of international solidarity, justice, peace, and socialism. Clarence Kailin. Clarence Kailin. Clarence Kailin. Now, yes. Now, everybody here knows Clarence so well that it is absolutely ridiculous for us to go through elements of his story and bits and pieces of him, because we are repeating that which we all know. And yet we will do it. And we will do it because we love Clarence and because we love the experience. We love the reality that Clarence connects us to that which is dramatically nobler than any transitory moment. I've had so many people come up to me today and say how they're a little bit frustrated. You know, Obama hasn't given us single-payer health care yet. Obama hasn't gotten the troops out of Iraq yet. Obama's sending more troops to Afghanistan. Lots to be frustrated about. But what I remind them of is this. Clarence Kailin didn't go to fight in Spain during the presidency of Herbert Hoover. Clarence Kailin went to fight in Spain during the presidency of Franklin Roosevelt. The fact of the matter is, no Democratic president has ever delivered us to the promised land. We deliver ourselves to the promised land. And Clarence Kailin, barely 20 years old, a child of Madison, Wisconsin, growing up down in the bush, down on the south side with the Jews and the Italians, the African Americans, everybody that didn't live in some other part of town like Maple Bluff. Clarence Kailin growing up down there on the south side of Madison, watching in 1918 when the soldiers came back, 1919, when the soldiers came back from World War I and they rode on their horses up Park Street, coming back from the First World War. His first memories of war. Never a warrior. Never somebody who wanted to fight. But somebody who believed in a cause. You know, Clarence's father had his card from the Communist Party, the Communist International. I hope I'm not extrapolating too much here, Clarence, to say he got it from Vladimir Lenin in 1905 in London on his way to Madison. Clarence raised in a socialist family and raised in a Jewish family. Watching the rise of fascism, 16, 17, 18, the fall of Czechoslovakia, the fall of Ethiopia, fascism on the march. And in 1936, when the fascists took Spain, and the American liberal government refused to act, when Franklin Roosevelt refused to send U.S. troops to defend the legally elected and legitimate Republican, small r, government of Spain, Clarence Kailin said, "Then I will go." And with 3,000 other Americans, most of them Jews, who knew in 1936 that there would be a Holocaust if they did not go and fight Franco then, most of them socialists and communists who knew that the cause of an equal, just, and peaceful world was at stake. They did not have to read a history book 20 years later to see the significance of the moment. Clarence Kailin said, "I will go. I will risk my life for people I have never met. I will risk my life for a country I have never lived in. I will do this because I believe that this is the moment when the whole world is at stake, when everything good is on the line, and I know which side I will be on." 3,000 Americans, 40,000 men and women from around the world who came to join the International Brigades and to fight in Spain against fascism. And today, Rush Limbaugh, I know it's a sin to say that name in a house of worship, Sean Hannity, Glenn Beck, add the IQs together and you get Daniel Cunnany's little toe. Today, these thugs, in their battle against a simple health care reform, tell us that they are against Obama because he's a socialist. And then in the next breath they tell us, and they're against national health care because that's fascism. They are so stupid or so dishonest that they would conflate socialism and fascism. And we are so lucky because we gather here today with Clarence Kailin, who doesn't have to read that history book, who can tell us from his own experience that the socialists went to fight the fascists. That when Hitler and Mussolini were on the rise, the socialists stood up and said, "No, they shall not pass. They shall not pass." Now, half the people that Clarence went to Spain with from this country died there. The International Brigades took horrible losses, but half of them came back. And you know what? Spain is the great story that we all tell ourselves. But the truth is that in Spain, these men and women learned to fight, and they brought that fighting spirit back to America. Clarence Kailin returned to this country determined to battle for civil rights, for economic and social justice, and for peace. And the members of the Lincoln Brigade have been in the forefront of every peace and economic and social justice struggle of my lifetime. Will Williams, you know this. Somebody who went and saw a war knows that they can stand up to the powerful, that they can say no, and no one has spoken more truth to power over the last 65, let's say 70 years than Clarence Kailin. It has not been easy. But Clarence Kailin has lived up to the words of La Pasionaria, the great woman communist leader in Spain, the great Republican leader. When she saw the Lincoln Brigades off, they were asked to leave, to give up the fight, because Franco had become so strong, his forces so strong, backed by Hitler and Mussolini, that the Spaniards said, our international allies, you have to go. We want to fight on our own because maybe that will cause the world to recognize that Hitler and Mussolini are backing up Franco. Maybe we can get the other countries, get all the foreigners out of here. We can have an honest fight. Or finally, maybe the United States and England and other countries will recognize the need to fight. And so they asked the brigadiers to leave. This is what La Pasionaria said to them in Barcelona on the eve of their departure. Comrades of the International Brigades, political reasons, reasons of state, the good of that same cause for which you offered your blood with limitless generosity, send some of you back to your countries and some to forced exile. Remember that many of those fighting were Jews from Germany who could not go back after Kristallnacht to Germany. You can go with pride. You are history. You are legend. You are the heroic example of the solidarity and the universality of democracy. We will not forget you. And when the olive tree of peace puts forth its leaves, entwined with the laurels of the Spanish Republic's victory, come back to us, and here you will find a homeland. 20 years from now, when Clarence Kailin dies, 25 years from now, Clarence's ashes will be buried in Spain. And I respect that choice. He will be buried at the side of his dear friend who he signed up with and fought with, John Cookson. He will help that town in Spain to always remember the solidarity and the sacrifice of Wisconsinites on their behalf. But I will tell you this, Clarence, Spain may get your ashes someday, but we will always have your spirit and your soul here in Madison, Wisconsin. You are a son of Madison. You are a son of our great progressive tradition. In fact, you are the greatest living, and you will always be the greatest model of all that we mean when we say progressive. Clarence Kailin, my hero, my friend. Happy birthday, Clarence Kailin.
I am delighted to be the speaker after John, because I don't have to say anything. Norm asked me when I came in what hat I was wearing today, and I did, and I had my Veterans for Peace hat on. He said, what are you doing? how about the Socialist Party? I said, well, I got that in my pocket here, so already. This beret came from Cuba, and the red star came from the Soviet Union, not Russia, but the Soviet Union. The little story I can tell you about Clarence, because only he and I know about it. It was about 15 or 20 years ago. Clarence just finally got fed up with his true party, the Communist Party. It was good people. But he saw how it was fading away, and he came over to me and said, Bob, will you let me join the Socialist Party? And I, of course, said, welcome to join Debs, Norman Thomas, Frank Zeidler, and Clarence Kailin. So it's good company to be in the Socialist Party of Wisconsin, the Socialist Party USA, with my comrade. Clarence and I have an unwritten way of talking to each other, and that's just sort of being quiet. So I'm going to shut up and just sit here and say hi, comrade. Thank you.
Well, again, the messages were many, and we're trying to read just some selections of a number of them. From Juan Maria Gomez Ortiz, who is the translator of Clarence's book, Remembering John Cookson. And I just want to say a little bit about that book for a second. There's a copy of it over in the window ledge there. Somebody can hold it up right there. And this is a book that Clarence wrote from the letters of his friend and fellow Madisonian John Cookson, who passed away in Spain on the Ebro River. John Cookson is buried in Spain. Clarence put together this book and couldn't get a publisher in the United States. And so then a friend in Spain translated the entire thing into Spanish, and it was published in Spain. And so now the only place you can get this book is if you buy it in Spain. And so I think that we should start a campaign again. We've tried this a couple of times to get the University of Wisconsin Press to publish the English version of this, since it is two hometown sons of Madison, John Cookson and Clarence Kailin. And so if people want to start that letter writing campaign tomorrow. Okay, so from Juan Maria Gomez Ortiz. Dear Clarence, it's a great joy for all your friends from all over the world to celebrate with you and your family your 95th birthday. A long life that could have been short as the lives of your comrades fallen fighting against fascism in Spain at the end of the 1930s and afterwards in other places of the world. I'm remembering especially the closest of your mates, John Cookson, with whom in the flower of your formative years in Wisconsin, full of energy and idealism of your young lives, you decided to put yourselves in jeopardy and assume all kinds of risks with the conviction that the cause of Spain was the same as all the advanced progressive mankind. Your decision helped support the Spanish Republic, its values of justice and freedom, could have avoided the Holocaust in Europe, and was a testimony of courage and solidarity and internationalism, which nowadays have become a permanent example of political and ethical action to new generations as an everlasting flame. The main part of your long life was spent fighting for justice and recovering the voices of international brigadiers disappeared, making the long way of history. When you were near your 90s, I've seen you in Spain accompanied by your son John and your daughter Julie, revisiting the places that shed young blood of the internationals. All of your friends in Spain will be grateful for this, and now you have become a Spanish compatriot, and this renewed evidence of your love for Spain and the Spaniards fills us with pride and satisfaction. If you think that it's worth it, it may be it is. We will continue fighting to make our country worthy of Spanish men like you. And that's from Juan Maria Gomez Ortiz. This also from Spain, this from Angela Jackson. And she writes, please pass on my best wishes to Clarence for a wonderful birthday celebration. On behalf of the members of our association here in Catalonia, No Jubilem La Memoria, I'd like him to know that we all appreciate all that he's done to recover the memory of the International Brigades in this area, especially in relation to the remembrance of John Cookson and all the volunteers who died in the Civil War. Our next speaker, I lost my piece of paper, is David Giffey. David Giffey has done much to keep alive the memory of veterans here in Madison of many different wars and produced the book Long Shadows, Veterans' Paths to Peace, which included the voices of Clarence Kailin and actually many other people in this room. David Giffey.
Thanks, Norm. Thanks. Most of all, Clarence, Kronia Pola, Clarence, that's Greek. That's the Greek birthday celebration. It means many years. They don't simply say happy birthday. And I must say that not a single day passes that I don't think of Clarence, that Clarence isn't on my mind. And I don't say that, I don't mean it's a nostalgic kind of sentimental thought that crosses my mind. When I think of Clarence, it's very much in real time. And it goes something like this. What would Clarence do about this? And that's no kidding. Clarence has been very, very influential in my life. Some others who have been influential, and I'll name a few, not in any way to compare them to Clarence or to each other, but some of the people who have had continuing influence on me along with Clarence are people like Helen and Scott Nearing, or the late William Osborne Hart, or Jesus Salas, or the late Eugene Parks, whose sister is with us today, or Howard Zinn, or Cesar Chavez, or Frank Zeidler. Sometimes I fantasize a phenomenal gathering of these people. And I equally fantasize something I'd like to do, maybe, you know, like make a nice meal for them or something like that. And I'd make sure that there was a big pot of that yellow curried soup, or rice that Clarence always brings to the socialist potluck. And then I'd just listen to the conversations that ensued. So how has Clarence influenced me personally? Since the very first time I met Clarence, he proved to me his generosity in sharing his time, his ideas, his possessions, his thoughts, his advice. He's been an example of trust, not the kind of suspicion and fear that is so prevalent, thanks to the people that John had the audacity to name. The suspicion and fear which seems to invade more and more of our lives and our culture and our society by day. Clarence has been an example of consistency and perseverance in his work for peace and justice. And he's chosen his battles very, very carefully and pragmatically, systematically, obviously fearlessly, for a pacifist to go and wage war, fearlessly, and therefore, his example is contrary to the kind of worrisome and ineffective fragmentation that can really undermine people in the peace and justice movements. I have grown to believe that Clarence is living proof of the fallacy of the old cliche that we continuously hear within our peace and justice organizations, that we are somehow preaching to the choir. Clarence's example, through his long life of activism, I believe that there isn't a choir, but there are movements that are built from the ground up, and changed and rebuilt and changed and rebuilt repeatedly at every moment before we get it right and make some real progress in terms of communal, social, and human activity. I sometimes worry that the false notion that there does exist some sort of choir of the converted in which everyone has the answers, that notion is nothing more than a convenient excuse for us to do nothing. The fictional notion that there's some kind of great choir that covers all of our issues paralyzes us. That notion distracts us from the things, however small, that each of us can do, the things that can be accomplished from the ground up by all of us, and the things that form the real kind of solidarity that's spoken about when the people from Spain acknowledge Clarence's accomplishments in life. That great big amorphous choir of the left, or whatever, notion certainly doesn't describe Clarence. If they existed, those false choirs, do you think Clarence might have watched, think of the choirs he might have watched, you know, coming and going in 95 years, from labor organizing in the 1930s and fighting against fascism in the Spanish Civil War through World War II, well, and his life as a premature anti-fascist, the McCarthy era, the civil rights movement, migrant farm worker organizing, the anti-war movement of the 60s, the dismantling of unions and social services by the great communicator Ronald Reagan, the continuing empire building and war waging under Democrats and Republicans, and further dissection of civil liberties and education, and through it all, the hateful demonization of the principles and even the use of the term democratic socialism. If there has existed some kind of choir of leftists or progressives or activists, however we choose to identify ourselves, you can bet that Clarence has influenced and outlived it. He outlived a lot of choir music in his unwavering and persistent lifetime. There are things that I won't salute, including a flag that fails to embody and symbolize principles of peace and justice for all. But I salute Clarence, and I wish him a happy birthday and many more years, and I thank him for his influence and friendship and generosity and example, which will remain with me forever. Happy birthday, Clarence.
Frank Emsbeck is going to speak a little bit about Clarence's contributions to the labor movement here in Madison.
Well, actually, I would like to talk about that, but I think there's something else here. I think there's a lot of things about Clarence that I don't think are as clear as we might want to make them, at least I want to make them. First of all, when I came here in 1961 and eventually got to meet Clarence and his family, I think for myself and many other younger radicals at the time, Clarence and his family were the introduction to many of us to the community of Madison, in particular to the South Side and to the issues of poverty, of racism, and to the fight for a reasonable welfare here. So we talk about Clarence and labor. Clarence's understanding of labor comes from a much different place. And I think when we talk about all these different things that he did, in a certain sense, we minimize the breadth of his understanding and the depth of his intellectual comprehension of what's going on in this society. So let me put it to you in English, I think, a little bit better. What Clarence is, he's not just a labor radical or a community radical or an anti-war radical. He is from the working class, and he is a class-conscious worker, and to that extent, what he brings to the party is a working-class vision of class consciousness. The single most devastating and dangerous thing of all is a worker with class consciousness who's involved in their community. and that is Clarence, as far as I'm concerned. And that is what he has brought to Madison, because the thing that unifies all the different things he did was this understanding of class and class consciousness, and the fact that things are not given to us, but only come from a mobilization of other working people and our friends to go take them. And that is, I think, the legacy of Clarence and the labor movement and what he has brought to Madison, Wisconsin. So having said that, I want to just say a couple of things about what all this has been here. I think it's more than 50 years ago, almost 60 years ago, when Clarence and his family intervened amongst a fight going on in Mazomanie. There were farm workers out there. It's in his biography, or it's in the notes I've got of this 12 hours of tape I still have of him, which I am going to ask the family to finally let me give to the library, but I won't do that right now. But in any event, one of the things that happened in 1940 or so was Clarence and his family went out to Mazomanie when they heard through the community that people were being kept there basically in slavery conditions, and fought for their release, fought for them to get paid, took on the agricultural establishment at the time, which was very strong in Wisconsin, and made sort of a blow, a very important and first blow for the organization of farm workers in the state of Wisconsin. So this is 1940. After that, among many other things, he wound up at Gisholdt, where again, taking a class-conscious position, fighting for Henry Wallace, to have Henry Wallace, the Progressive Party, on the ballot in Wisconsin, for which he was then blacklisted and driven out of Gisholdt by right-wingers in the Steelworkers Union. Ultimately, he wound up at the university, where he became an activist in AFSCME. And I'd like to think, to the extent that there's democratic consciousness in AFSCME today, Democrat with a small d, it's because of Clarence's activities and work over many, many years to bring people together and to fight for the interests of working people. Not the interests of the governor or the interests of some leader, but the interests of working people. So from my perspective, coming here in the 60s and then coming back quite a bit later and having a chance to talk with Clarence and understand this, I believe that what we can do most, if we're going to follow on in Clarence's footsteps, is to bring to all of our work a class consciousness, a sense that working people are entitled to what we have to have: health care, a democratic society, an end to war. And we're entitled to that because collectively we're producing the wealth. And it's that ideology of hope and democracy which I believe sustains many of us and which has sustained Clarence for these many years, and we thank him for it.
Another of Clarence's great contributions has to do with getting black history taught in the schools here in Wisconsin. It was Clarence Kailin who first composed a book called Black Chronicle, where he put together information about African American history in the United States and brought it to the school district and said, you should use this for a text. And after hammering on the doors for a long time, he finally got the book incorporated. It went through a couple of editions, and now black history, of course, is a regular component in the public schools in Wisconsin. We do have a school teacher here with us, Tina Jenkins, who's going to say a couple of words as well. And then after that, we're going to hear from the granddaughter of Oliver Law, who was a Abraham Lincoln Brigade veteran, and then we're going to hear from some other Abraham Lincoln Brigade veterans' children and grandchildren, Clarence's family. But Tina Jenkins, welcome.
I really like that song that was sang earlier. And in particular, I liked that verse that says, ask Clarence Kailin how to live a life of purpose and direction. And Clarence says to you, you make a left turn at every intersection. Clarence Kailin, I thank you. I thank you for being my comrade on the left. Clarence, I thank you for being my teacher, because Clarence was truly my teacher. Clarence, thank you for being a father figure for me in this community, because my dad lived in Ruth, Mississippi. But like you, he was a pistol-toting anti-fascist fighter too. You in 1936 and he in the 1960s. But if you had taken down with an Abraham Lincoln Brigade those fascists in Spain, he wouldn't have had to be a pistol-toting anti-fascist, anti-racist fighter in the 60s in our own country. But I thank you for all your effort, Clarence. You were the man who taught me to always take a left turn when it came to peace in the Madison community, when it came to justice in the Madison community, and for me personally and professionally, when it came to education of all the children, and that includes the black children in the Madison public schools. The Madison Public Schools still has not learned that lesson about how to teach black children. But Clarence was out there fighting when I came to Madison in the 60s for that. And because of Clarence's efforts and the efforts of many others in this community, I was able to teach African American history. And when I told a friend today, who's my husband sitting back there, that Clarence was my teacher, he said to me, "Did he teach you at the university?" And I said to him, "No." I said, "I don't even know if Clarence has a degree from that university." He was better than a university teacher to me, because what he was to me was that man who taught me on the streets of Madison. He taught me in this community. And most importantly, Clarence taught me in my classroom. This was one of the first books that I brought to my African American history class. And later on, I had the later edition of the Black Chronicles in my history class. And Clarence, I have about 15 or 20 of these in my basement right now, because when I left Shabazz High School, I took them with me. Because you had given these to me, and I figured they're going to be mine to take to my next teaching assignment or to give to my grandchildren. So Clarence, I thank you for that. Clarence, you taught me, and because you taught me, I was able to always take that left turn when I taught your grandchildren. And I know Jennifer is here today because I saw her earlier. And I taught Megan, and I taught Silvada. In fact, I met Silvada, was it in 1986, Julie, when we had that big Clarence Kailin thing out to that, on the east side, off East Washington Avenue there. And Silvada came to my school because her mother always tells the story that Silvada said, whoever that woman was that spoke at Grandpa's section, and wherever she teaches at, that's where I'm going to school. And that's where she came. And Julie was one of my parents there, and Clarence came as frequently as I called him to speak to the students, to talk to the students. So Clarence, thank you. Thank you very much for being my left-wing comrade. Thank you for never wavering when it came to the anti-racist fights in this community. The black community not only knew that it could always count on Clarence Kailin. In fact, Clarence Kailin was one of us. Clarence, we love you.
Next we have John Kailin, Clarence's son.
I'm so moved, and I was asked if I would speak about personal things about our father's life. But I've got to tell you that the most important personal lesson I learned was the solidarity of the Communist parties of the world. It was the driving force that brought my father to Spain. It was the solidarity of men and women in every country of the world that traced back to the French Revolution and then the Russian Revolution, and that was the inspiration for every war of independence around the world. And it was the chairman of the Communist Party of the United States who came to Dad and said, "We want you to go to Spain." This was the message of the parties all over the world, that there is one country that is fighting back, whose people have voted a democracy and who are being crushed, and we need to support them. It was Dad's party, the Communist Party, that was the only party that recognized the dignity of the working class and fought for the trade unions. And most importantly of all, it was the only party that understood that 300 years of chattel slavery created a great scar in American life, and that you could not possibly organize workers or organize any movement without fighting for the truth to be told about racism and its basis in the American economy. And it was that fight that Dad kept up and he shared with communists around the world. So I don't want this day to go by sidestepping the fact that there was a movement in this country whose ideals permeated all of the progressive movements of this time, and whose ideals we have to continue in some form or another. On a personal note, let me say that that Dad is one of the few people who is not afraid to talk of death and of his death. It didn't happen, I think, until recently. But I think Dad sees his life, he sees the continuum of life and death, and he plays his role in that continuum from day to day. He knows that the next day is not about yesterday's battle, but it's about a new battle. You all know that he got pneumonia when he was petitioning for stopping the Iraq War. That sent him into a coma. He had not at that point finished getting his book, John Cookson, translated in Spain. When he came out of the coma, his first words were, "I can't go now, I've got things to do."
Clarence's grandson, who's a renowned hip-hop artist from Milwaukee, hip-hop spoken word, and he's going to do something for us right now.
Peace and blessings. Let me have all y'all stand up. Valerie, tell Zeus to bring in my son, bring him up. Last year, I don't know if you guys know who Africa Bambaataa and the Universal Zulu Nation is, the one who created hip-hop music in the 70s. I'm an ambassador of the Universal Zulu Nation, which is based out of Bronx, New York. We had the privilege of doing a show in Barcelona. So when I was walking on the streets of Barcelona, a lot of the Spanish crew I was with were explaining a lot about the history, but a lot of it I already knew thanks to my grandfather, who's also, besides being an activist, and the great grandfather was also a historian. So it just so happened, say peace. Peace. Say Clarence.
Clarence.
Say good fight.
Good fight.
All right. Wait 1 second. So, to make a long story short, one of the brothers who ran the studio over there with the Spanish crew I was with, his grandfather was actually one of the brothers who fought against Franco, Mussolini, and Hitler in Spain as well, except his grandfather had died, so we had a commonality. I didn't speak good Spanish and he didn't speak good English, but we had a commonality in our grandfathers and in the struggle. But it's real important that this message is not just about praising a man's work, but continuing the fight and the youth movement. Because as you know, as far as hip-hop music is concerned, it's been invaded. And if you know the history of music and youth movements, they tried to invade the youth movement of Germany with the Hitler Youth, and they invaded the music and the popular culture, because that's where it starts, with the minds of the youth. If you can distort the minds of the youth, then it's much easier to mislead the people. Where if we can reverse that trend and start with them, then they can't deceive the people, because once the people know that whether you black, white, whether you Hebrew, whether you Muslim, Christian, you have a common oppressor, a common enemy, then that transcends all type of different boundaries and makes us one. Because ultimately, as we know, there is only one race on planet Earth, which is the human race. And one thing a lot of people don't know that my grandfather did, hold on 1 second, is that he wrote a book called Black Chronicles. This was a study book, not written from a white liberal perspective in the 60s, but from a man who was talking about the contributions of ancient African civilizations to the entire world. And this was revolutionary in of itself in the 1960s, when they started calling us Negro instead of African, Asiatic, or Nubian, our great heritage. So this was one thing he did, is to educate people of every race, because the cancer of planet Earth is white supremacy. And out of those, you have the isms, the sexism, the racism, the capitalism, and the fascism, and the Nazism, and all those type of isms that come from that cancer. So we can defeat that cancer with true awareness. And it starts with the youth. I wish there was more youth right now in the audience, because those are the ones who are going to take the message and take this continuing struggle on. And one thing I always appreciate about my grandfather, he wasn't what we call a box or a book revolutionary. Most of us, stand and picket signs and put up the good fight from a very comfortable place in the United States. But getting on the front line against the Third Reich, which was the most technologically advanced army during that era, with World War I rifles, you fighting against Hitler's best. But we was proven it was Hitler's worst when it came down to freedom fighters, because even technology and wars we saw in Vietnam, as we saw in Spain, as we saw all over in certain parts of the African world, that if the people are united, the people's combined effort can fight a much greater military foe if they stay organized and move according to one thought, one aim, one people, one God. All right? So I don't want to take too much time. I'm going to drop a little lyric. I didn't know that I'd be speaking, but I had to speak because my grandfather is the greatest influence in my life, and it's because of him that this struggle will continue. And what you do in this time ripples. Like if I go throw a rock out there, scientifically they'll tell you that the pond or the little ripple effect never stops. It even goes through what they call seismic waves, and even goes through the Earth's geographical, whatever it is, scientifically they told us. He's put a lot of ripples, and the ripples are us. And we got to continue this through time and space. And whether my grandfather passes away in 1,000 years, in African religion and tradition, we don't deal with death, we deal with life. You just cross over and be born into an instant ancestor. So I don't know what death means. I don't know what not to be alive is, because we only deal with life. Jah Rastafari. Here we go. You ready? I'm going to give you a spoken word. This is freestyle. Right about now, I've got my son in front of me to make an appearance. Without no insurance, you say, Dad, but who's your granddaddy? Clarence. If I make a good fight, then it's all because we're good black, good white. No, it's no race. It's only humanity. I speak for any nationality. I'm not with this capitalist insanity trying to damage me. The sexism, racism, thisism, thatism, whiteism, blackism, capitalism. If I'm going to be part of ism, it got to be socialism, or maybe what Marcus Garvey said, Pan-Africanism. Now, I'll break that, take that. How can you relate that? Did you really invent these lyrics right here on a Sunday and make that? Because I'm creative, but I got to give it to my grandfather and my grandmother. And right about now, I all love them, the Kailin family. And also, half my family came from Kenya. I'm not Obama because I got people on the agenda. Yeah, I'm sort of mad that I voted for a black president, even though I love the black man, because he's not really a black president. He's down for money, and that's really irrelevant. He's like another black face of the New World Order, like there was a white face of the New World Order. But I'm here to talk to the sons, the daughters, the aunts, the uncles, the struggles, the people who live in the skyrise, the people who live in the concrete jungle. Whether you're in Kingston or Soweto, you know that our thing and our foe is one. It's all one. White, black, yellow, it's all one. It's all sun. It's all one. I'm Clarence. You Clarence. He Clarence. We all Clarence. Are you Clarence? We make an appearance. And right now, I don't know what I'm going to say next. I leave it to the ancestors. He's in a wheelchair, but don't ever diss his ability. He's not disabled. Don't ever say he got a disability. He got a capability. And if you feel there, give me a real dare. We're going to be rolling in a wheelchair with 2 feet, rocking to a new beat. Do you speak? Of course I do. There's only one God, one aim, one race, one face, and that's you. Love humanity. Peace.
Yeah, Clarence, I don't know how words can describe what you mean, not just to people here in Madison or Wisconsin or in this country, but throughout the world. You are a citizen of the world. And from what I've learned about you during the short time that I met you, I know that you touched a lot of people all over the world. And I will always feel indebted to you for encouraging me at a time when I wanted to speak out against our government, the government in this country. When I was getting challenged or slammed by people, and it was you who told me, I think it was the time on the square when it was about 10,000 people at a rally, and I spoke. And I think I told you that I didn't feel that what I was doing any good. And you explained again about time and how things happen over time, and that changes will come over time. So I'll always remember you for that. And I think people throughout the world will remember you.
Well, all I gotta say is we got a lot of work to do. You know, this country is led by mad people, cynical people. We have an administration that isn't worth a damn for the world. And we have to do our own work. It's up to us. Nobody's going to do it for us. So I hope that all of you will, you know, get out, call your neighbors who probably don't know what's going on, and call your friends. Do something. Just move, and eventually we'll get the job done.
Want to be in his family.
You're welcome. Just come and join with. Oh, thank you.
So sweet.
Yeah.